Hi there, Matt Petrowski here, and we are taking a look at the Theme Studio. Now, this is the feature that I like the most. In fact, I created it because I do a lot of tweaking of objects within my FileMaker solutions. Now, when FileMaker 12 came out, it implemented a completely new way for how they were dealing with layouts and how those layouts were rendered. Now, the Theme Studio provides a convenient database for us to be able to have a workspace area. In fact, I'm just going to go up here to the View menu. And what you're going to see is, as I zoom in here, there is this option right here that says Open Workspace. Now, what that's going to do is it basically exports just an empty FileMaker file and opens it for me ready to use. Now, you may get a password prompt sometimes, and it does allow guest access, so just check the guest access and open it, and that'll still open it with full access. But basically, all this is a throwaway database. In here, I've got a couple of sizes. I'm going to go into layout mode and simply delete everything because I don't need anything on the layout right now. Now, the tweak tool allows you to tweak individual objects within the FileMaker layout. I'm just going to add a simple button, and I'll drag that out right there, and I'll just say set variable. It doesn't really matter what you choose in order to make this do, and I'll just name this button. Now, over in the Theme Studio, I may have some type of icon that I'm working on. In fact, here's a solution that I'm working on called Yahoo Orders, and I'm just going to use my renderer, and I'm going to throw a little check mark on there. I'm going to right-click here and change the color on this maybe to something like an orange. And I definitely want to make this larger than my button. If my button size is actually 44, then I'm going to make it double the size at 88. I can also see that it's actually 2.3 kilobytes, and I'd like it to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to use this optimize feature right here. And I'm going to click and optimize that. Now that I've optimized that, I can quickly click this button, and it will export this to a location that I want. I'm going to put it right on my desktop, and I'm just going to call it check mark. And click save. Looks like I already have one, and I'll just go ahead and replace that. So now that I've optimized this graphic, not only to be double the size, but also the color that I want, I can integrate it onto this button. I can do that by going over to this fill option and choosing image. Now you notice as soon as I choose the check mark, the one thing that I lose is I lose my gradient that was formerly on the button. Now I'm going to have to choose this option right here and change it from tile to actually scale to fit. And once I do that, it's actually going to fit and it's going to be centered within my button. Now that's great and all if I wanted to go to the text here and delete the text, but what if I want the text and the actual object? Well, I'm going to put that text back in there, button, and then I'm going to make it a little bit larger, really big. Now the problem is I want this button or this image to be over on one of the sides of the button. Here's where the tweak tool comes in handy. Every possible layout object in FileMaker can be tweaked because from the time that we copy this onto the clipboard, FileMaker puts it into its own proprietary format. Now, I need to give you a caveat. Tweaking FileMaker layout objects is quote-unquote against FileMaker suggestions, I should say, as I go over to my tweak tool. Now they do expose the clipboard for us and do allow its manipulation, but there's a lot of things that FileMaker does not have exposed over in the inspector palette. For example, I can add an image here, but this image, I can't put it anywhere within this button. I can't put it over on the right or over on the left. Well, it turns out that because FileMaker behind the scenes is using CSS or its own variant of CSS implementation, we can see that because the Theme Studio exposes it via the tweak tool. Now remember, I copied this to the clipboard. I click this Get Clipboard button. And what will happen is it will grab over here an item that basically now says captured with the date with the timestamp. Now I can rename that if I want to save that in my Theme Studio. You can see that I have a number of them saved here, but most of the time these are just throwaway modifications that I make because once I save this button as part of the theme in my original file, then it's pretty much saved that way forever, and I can always go get a copy of it if I need to. Now, in the tweak tool, you're going to see a lot of text. In fact, this text is basically using the standard XML format. I don't have to know XML in order to understand what and where I can tweak things. As I scroll through this text, you're going to see that there is this local CSS tag, and it's actually been highlighted as yellow. Everything in between the two yellow tags is an override, or it's an area where you can make an override that will actually affect the changes to the object. Now, if you're familiar with CSS, or if you just go read even a little bit about CSS, you'll find out the myriad of things that you can control with regards to all of FileMaker's objects. Now, here's a little tip. If it's listed within the full CSS area, then that is something or an aspect that you can actually modify. So, for example, we have the self identifier, which identifies the actual button itself in this case. But as we scroll down, you're going to see that there is background position, background size, repeat, origin, clip, and on and on and on. All individual borders, right, top, bottom, left, their size. All of these can be accessed in the inspector, but some things cannot be accessed in the inspector, especially when it comes to tab panels, sliders, and many other FileMaker layout objects that basically have a lot of different elements. Now, almost every FileMaker object has two different levels. It has an outer border, and then it has an inner border. So as I scroll down, you're going to see a second item right here that is self inner border. So as I zoom in on this so that we can take a really good look, this inner border exists on almost every single FileMaker object. It is a second level that you can access in order to do things that you might want to change or you might want to support. So what I'm going to do is I can actually, first off, we will zoom back out and I'll show you how easy it is to align this object. We need to scroll all the way up to the area where it said local CSS. You have to remember, any changes that we make into the full CSS won't actually show up. So we're never going to change anything within the gray areas or the gray text. We're always going to do all of our modifications between the two yellow highlighted local CSS tags. But here's how easy it is to change the orientation or the position, not the orientation, the position of this button. As I zoom in right here to the background position, all I have to do is change center to left. That's pretty much all there is to it. When I click on the Set Clipboard and then come back over to my workspace and paste, notice that the object is now left aligned. So if you take the time to learn the CSS, then you're going to be able to actually make these small tweaks and modifications. Even if FileMaker adds in support for, say, for example, aligning images on buttons, there are many things under the scenes that you can do that FileMaker just probably won't expose. Think about putting images on individual tabs rather than words. That doesn't even exist when you actually add tabs right now, but it's certainly possible to do. So as I was mentioning at the very beginning, I lost my gradient. So here's what I can do to this whole object. First off, all I have to do is recognize that I have the self object, which is the outer border, and the inner border, which is the inner border object. By making one simple change, by simply changing this from self to self.inner_border, what I've done now is I've moved this image, I'm actually going to be making a copy of the image, into the inner border object. So I'm going to click Set Clipboard, and I'm now going to paste this object over here. Notice that my gradient just came back, but I have my image on my actual button. Now, I don't have access to this image through FileMaker's inspector anymore. The only place where I can access this image is within the tweak area of the tool, of the Theme Studio. But if I need to change this image with something else, watch how easy it is. Let's say, for example, I no longer wanted this to be an actual orange check mark, but I now want it to be a green check mark. Going back over to icons, I can actually right-click on the color, choose a text color that is a green check mark. I will optimize my object. And in this case, rather than exporting, all I'm going to do is go to this little area right here of the base 64. I will select all of this text, copy it, go over to my tweak area, select in the object I'm already tweaking, and I'm simply going to change out the base 64 code. This is how easy it is. I'll select at the end of the parenthesis, highlight all the way up until I actually get just before this base 64 comma. So the comma is the delimiter in this case. I will paste the text, click Set Clipboard, come back over to my database and paste. And there I have it. I have my optimized green check mark on my button. All I have to do now is basically go up to my default setting, which is currently the style for this particular object. Using my own custom theme, I can save save these changes to the current style, which will change all buttons that are currently set as the default, and then basically save the changes to my theme. Once I've done that, it'll affect my whole solution. I now have access to an image on my button. I also have access to be able to change my gradient if desired. We'll change it to a really nice, ugly magenta here, and we'll change the font color as well. But you can see how easy it is to take advantage of FileMaker's multiple levels within the CSS using the tweak tool. And the limits to what you can do in terms of what is supported by FileMaker objects is pretty much limitless. You can do all kinds of things.